Hello, everybody. You are very welcome to Let's Talk About Palestine, an initiative brought forward by Teachers for Palestine. This is the third year in a row that we've ran this in schools all around the country. Started off quite small with a handful, double-digit schools in its first year. Last year, we had over 100 schools take part. And so this year, hopefully, we will have even more. So what is Let's Talk About Palestine? We are trying to keep the conversation going around Palestine. We want to get, in our schools, there's very little said about Palestine. I think really where Teachers for Palestine, and in particular, Let's Talk About Palestine, where it came from was some of us noticed in our staff rooms after October the 7th in 2023, when all of this started to happen, we noticed teachers in our staff rooms didn't really know anything about the situation and what was happening. And so we felt that, well, this is wrong. We looked in our history books in school and we looked throughout the whole curriculum, and there was very, very little, in fact, none really, I would say, that had anything to do with Palestine or explained the situation or what was happening there, despite this going on for over nearly 100 years at this stage. So it was we found that we felt we needed to do something, and that's why we set up Teach for Palestine. And one of the first initiatives that we had was Let's Talk About Palestine. Now, we say it's a week, or in this case 2 weeks. What we want people to do is, the reason we kind of picked a time frame, it's not that we don't want you to talk about Palestine every other time. Absolutely, we do. And we've created a massive bank of resources for teachers to be able to do that. But we felt that we should concentrate it into a week or into 2 weeks, where we could kind of get as many people involved as possible over the 2 weeks. So what we're asking is, in primary school, is that you look at things that you could do just to highlight the beauty of Palestine, just to essentially put it on the map, because let's face it, they're trying to erase it from the map. So we want to make sure that our students, by the time they finish primary school, they know exactly that there is this country called Palestine. Here's what the flag looks like. Here's what the colors are. Here's the type of food they eat. Here's the local dances, etc. It's very much focus on the culture of Palestine, and the beauty of it. And then as we get into second level, we want our students to leave second level knowing what is happening in Palestine. We want to talk about really important issues such as colonialism, apartheid, genocide currently. And so we think these are really important topics for our students to know. And we don't really discuss these things anywhere in the curriculum. So we want to try and shine a light on what is happening in Palestine, so that when it does, if anything does happen into the future again, that unlike our staff rooms 3 or 4 years ago, that people will be more informed and they will know what is happening. So as part of Let's Talk About Palestine fortnight, we have a series of webinars where we hope to shine a light and get more information from people who have been involved with Palestine, who have been out to Palestine, who are from Palestine, who have experienced the current genocide, who have experienced some of the attacks over the last 20 or 30 years. So we have this series of webinars, hopefully that teachers can watch, can inform themselves. But not only that, they may be able to use some of these webinars in their classroom to show some of the students, particularly at second level. You may be able to link it to your lessons somehow to show what is happening and what is going on. So part of that, the very first meeting that we have tonight, we're going to focus on the flotillas. The flotillas, for people who don't know, are groups of boats that have, for the last years and years, last 20 so years, have tried to break the siege that is on Gaza. So essentially Gaza is hemmed in. They're not letting anything in or out. They block materials going in, going out, block trade, block all the rest of it. So some of these flotillas try to send humanitarian aid in over the last number of years to try to break that siege and to open a corridor for aid to reach Gaza. So in that, we have two people. We have Sarah Clancy, who will get Michelle to introduce in a second, but Sarah has been on a number of these missions, or one of these missions in the past, and we'll also be joined, hopefully, depending on the connection and depending on what's happening on the boat at the present moment in time. But we do have a teacher, a fellow member of Teachers for Palestine, who's currently on the flotilla at the moment, that just left, I think, yesterday. So we're hoping to get through to the boat to Mikey and talk to him. So listen, without further ado, I'll bring in Michelle, and Michelle can introduce Sarah, because I believe she's been working for the last number of weeks to try and get Sarah to join us tonight.
Yeah, so just Fáilte, Sarah, and Sarah, we really appreciate, we know how busy you are. You're still involved in the Flotilla currently. So just to introduce you, Sarah is a poet, a community worker from Galway. She holds an MA in public advocacy and activism, and also diplomas in European law, human rights law, and community development practice. Sarah began writing poetry in 2009 and has published many collections. And as a performance poet, Sarah won the Court International Festival of Literature Grand Slam Championship in 2011. And she's been placed in several of Ireland's prestigious writing poetry competitions. So social justice is one of the many themes Sarah incorporates in her work. Sarah's poems have been translated into many world languages, and her work has been broadcasted on RTE and BBC Radio. And Sarah is a much admired activist and commentator, and she's been involved in many campaigns, including advocating for environmental justice, marriage equality, the campaign to end direct provision. And in the context of tonight's seminar, last autumn, Sarah was one of the Irish contingent aboard the Spectre as part of the global Samud Flotilla in the month-long attempt to break the Israeli siege on Gaza and to bring aid supplies to the people of Gaza. So Fáilte, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Michelle and Andrew. It's lovely to be here. I'm just realizing the downside of not responding quickly to send someone your proper bio, because I would have said poet and community worker from Galway would have been all I said. But anyway, so I'm mortified now before I start. But just maybe one thing to say is that I'm delighted to be here. I've been doing my best to do anything involving a union, anything involving teachers, anything involving people who speak to other people on a daily basis, that that my ongoing contribution is to try and go out and get the messages out to those groups. And the main message I have, really in 3 short sentences is: you're not wrong. It is a genocide, and that Israel has always been like this. These are the 3 things people can feel. You can feel a sense of doubt. So I'll go through some of those things a little bit. I'm not, just to say before I start, I'm not, a historian of Palestine. I'm not a decolonial expert. I'm just in this context, I'm just someone who went on a flotilla and has been involved for a number of years in activism around Palestine since I became aware of what the reality there is. So that's, we can have a great chat, but I can probably point you to other sources who are more knowledgeable about, the intricacies of it than I am. But just one thing to say, that Mikey Cullen, who is on the flotilla now at this minute, he just left yesterday. He has been away and has been training. There's quite a intensive training process in non-violence and in how to respond in tense situations and so on before you go on the flotilla. So he's been doing that, but he set sail yesterday. And just to say that Mikey is a poet also. He's a super performance poet and a spoken word artist. But I had the job of interviewing, I hope this is not telling tales out of school, but I had the job of interviewing Mikey for the flotilla, myself and another participant. It's just to check whether people know what they're facing and why they're doing it, and we're just trying to get a sense of people. And one of the things that Mikey said to me in that interview, he said, "I'm a teacher, and he said, I'm standing there. We're wondering why." He said, "I'm teaching young men, and we're wondering why young men are becoming cynical, and we're wondering what we can do to support young men into the world. And I'm there and I'm teaching them there's a genocide happening." And he said that, the thing that I think I can teach them is by putting my money where my mouth is. I think that this would be, if I'm chosen to go on the flotilla, they'll never forget that their teacher said never again and then went to try and do something about it. So I just thought he was definitely going. We were all kind of thinking, oh God, I'm so glad that people like him are teaching young people. And I think, it's not so much the flotilla is not about anybody's individual heroism, and nobody on it is heroes, but just that example in secondary school that your teacher vanishes to go and do something about it, I think is going to be powerful probably throughout the lives of the people that it comes across. So that's just a word about Mikey. I can't say it when he's here because I'll embarrass him. So that really is it. So I'll tell you a little bit. Many years ago, I've been involved in activism around Palestine for, not that long, because I was late to political activism. So if anybody else was late, don't worry, you're not alone. I used to buy and sell horses, so I mostly spent most of my life selling bad horses to people for as much money as I could, until I kind of got interested in the world and went traveling a little bit. And one of the things that when I went traveling, I used to start to learn about little things. But one kind of formative experience that I had, I wouldn't say I was unaware, but I certainly wouldn't have thought about it that much. And one of the experiences that I had, I met a young Israeli woman. I was backpacking in India, which was really nice, and I was about maybe 24 or 25, and I'd say she was about 21, and she was a young Israeli woman. Now, at the time, lots of groups of Israeli people went around India backpacking, but it usually was as a result of they had finished their military service, and they used to go all in a group to kind of de-stress themselves and relax after having done their military service in the Israeli Offense Forces, as we're calling them now. Now their military service is compulsory in Israel. Israel is best really understood as a state within a defense industry, or a state within a military, rather than the other way around. It's not the military for the state. But so the culture around that military is that everybody had to do military service. Now, I didn't know anything about that, but the young Israeli woman that I was traveling with, she was in India because she had refused to do her military service. She'd done part of her military service and left. And so she explained to me why she had left. Now, she wasn't really, I'm just going to say, she wasn't really a human rights activist or anything. She just was, I think, quite a stubborn and also, she knew what she thought was wrong, and she was going to stick to it. But what she had said to me was that once they finished their initial training, one of the things that happened, they finished a period, maybe 6 weeks or something, and then they would go out on active service. And as part of that active service, one of the policies of the military was that they would go in active duty, and that they would be put in a situation where they would open fire at targets. Right. Now, I didn't realize, when she was saying this to me, that I didn't realize that when they were saying targets, that what they meant was Palestinians. Right. And so, that was kind of innocence. And I was like, oh, you don't like shooting or something like that. And she was like, no, she was like, those people never did anything to me. Why would I shoot them? I'm not going to shoot them. And so it just dawned on me that this was, and when I asked her further, she said she thought that they did that so that the people at the very earliest stages of their military service would feel complicit, that they would feel they had taken part in what was happening. And that in that way that humans are, quite often we have justifications for what we ourselves have done. And so it just stayed with me. I didn't really know anything. But when I started to hear politically then about Palestine, that was the founding, I had the founding sense that something was really, really, really wrong. Now that was just a short time. After that, I was involved in fundraising for the free Gaza boats, which were, various flotilla attempts that were trying to leave in 2010 and 2009, 2010, and then a little bit later. And then in 2010, really, really horrifically, 10 activists just like me, Turkish people on the Mavi Marmara ship, it was boarded by the Israeli Naval Service, and the 10 activists were murdered. There were many people on that boat, maybe 400 or 500, but 9 were murdered immediately. One was injured and died later. And there really has never been any accountability for that happening, and that just stuck with me. That a naval force could go out into international waters and shoot humanitarians, you know, activists, civil society activists, and nothing would happen to them. And so those were two things, as you can imagine. That was like, you know, there was an awful lot of grief around it, and there was fear around it. And I know that a lot of the people who were much more involved then than I was, all I was doing was like maybe a quiz night or a talk or whatever. I wasn't really involved, but all of the other people, that really, you know, that really made them question everything. But to come back a small bit, the reason people keep doing this, the reason people keep doing this and people keep trying to do this is that, so some people will know this, but like Gaza, I'm from Galway, okay? So Gaza, if you stretched out Galway from my home in Salt Hill, you wouldn't quite reach Gort in County Galway. You wouldn't quite get there. You'd nearly get to Gort, maybe 3 or 4 kilometres outside that. And it's around about 5 or 6 miles most of the way down. It's a tiny, tiny place. 2.3 million people live there. So everything that we're hearing about that has happened in the last 2 years has happened to a densely populated area that size. 60% of the people there are under 15, right? So it is a war on children, on civilians, on, you know, on, it really, it's inescapable, right? Now, the other thing is that the people are not allowed leave. I'm sure some of you have seen the film The Zone of Interest. And The Zone of Interest is about the Holocaust, you know, one of the greatest evils and atrocities that we have seen. Not the only one, but certainly one of the worst things that humankind has done to humankind. The exact same scenario, the scale is different, but the exact same level of intent, of industrialization, there's a high-tech genocide against a captive people happening in Gaza. And just 4 or 5 kilometers up the road, 20 kilometers up the road, people are drinking matcha lattes and going for, you know, doing pilates at the beach, and they're on rollerblades, or they're, you know, they're. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't affected in any way, but their normal lives are continuing inside the state of Israel, right? Now, this might sound ludicrous to people, but at one stage, the Israelis also hired lots of, you know, kind of mercenaries, really. They hired lots of people to do their supposed humanitarian aid program. So they have UNRWA, which is the UN refugee organization, which was set up specifically and specially for Palestinians. They're the only group of people in the world that have their own refugee organization. But Israel doesn't like UNRWA. It has never liked UNRWA, not from the start. The reason it says it doesn't like UNRWA because Hamas are working for UNRWA, right? We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that bit, because it's kind of a misunderstanding of what Hamas is and their function in Gaza. But just leaving that aside, the reason UNRWA was set up was because 750,000 people were displaced from their homes by Israel, by the land given to Israel in what was called an Nakba. And they ended up, some of those people, their families are still in refugee camps today. That was 1948. They're still living in refugee camps in Jordan, in Syria, in, you know, or have made it. I suppose the luckier ones maybe have made it out into the diaspora around the world. So that was a you know, an absolute catastrophe. Like, if you think of the size of the population, it's a catastrophe on a par with the Irish famine, you know, the effects on the Irish population of the Irish famine. Maybe more so, because that was around about almost half the population at the time. And that the country has not healed from that. Those refugees are understood to have a right of return. And this is why Israel doesn't like UNRWA, because UNRWA believes in theory, now it hasn't succeeded in it, but it believes that because international law says refugees have the right of return to where they were displaced from when it becomes safe to do so, Israel doesn't like that, because if the Palestinians that they displaced come back, what happens to Israel? You know, the territory that Israel occupies has expanded, you know, even at the very start when the territory was split up, at the very, very start, the new Jewish population and the Jewish population that had lived there were given 56% of the territory of what would have been historical Palestine or British Mandate Palestine, even though they only made 30% of the population. So from the very beginning, and that moved on. So that's what's happening. People cannot get out of Gaza. The other thing to say is that siege that was put on Gaza has been going on for 18, nearly 19 years at this stage. They've been under siege since 2007. So what that means is if you have a young man or a young woman of 17 or 18, they have lived their entire life under a siege, right? And what does a siege mean? A siege means that Israel decides what comes in, what goes out, to the extent that during this genocide, they have been calculating the calories which they will send in according to how much they think Palestinians should eat. So it is absolutely constructed, deliberate annihilation of a people. It really is. I can't say it's stronger than that. We get used to hearing it, and the only reason I'm stressing that is because we have to remind ourselves what it is. So 80% of all the buildings in the place have been destroyed, right? More than half of the population of Gaza have been displaced over and over again. So they're chasing them up to the north of Gaza, down to the south, up to the north, saying there's a safe zone here. Israel, since the Board of Peace, so-called Board of Peace and the ceasefire, Israel has taken 51% of Gaza, the so-called yellow line that they have. So they've pushed the 2.3 million people into only half the size of the territory that I'm taking. So in those 18 years, right, I'm coming back to the flotillas now, but in those 18 years, almost 19 years, no organization, no government, no state, no navy, no military. The siege has been illegal since the start. No one has tried to break it except the flotillas, right? Now, by that, I don't mean aid is going in. So aid organizations are working there, UNRWA's working there, all these organizations are going in. But they have all accepted that Israel gets to say what goes in and out of Gaza. So the organization, the chaotic, amateur, non-sailor, non-logistical, non-conflict specialist group of ordinary people, group after group of ordinary people that have been involved in the flotillas and have been involved in, for example, the land convoys that tried to do the same thing. They're the only people who have been trying to say, we will not leave those people here, right? In that, lots of people have advocated for it, but in terms of actually going, we will not recognize this siege, we will break the siege, we will go in because we do not accept that you can keep people in an open air prison for that length of time. So that's the function and the role of the flotillas. It's quite confusing sometimes when people talk about aid, because if we were a method of delivering aid, if the flotillas were a method of delivering aid, it would be a really, really inefficient it would be really an inefficient method of delivering aid. But one of the things that's worth remembering is if all the borders were open, right? If all the borders were open, there were no checks and there were no restrictions. With the size of Gaza, it would take about between 3 to 5 days to make sure that everybody had emergency shelter and emergency rations, right? 3 to 5 days. And that has not happened for 3 years, right? So as far as I can see, any action that anybody can do to pressure governments to act themselves, that this is why the flotillas are traveling. They're traveling to say this: we do not recognize the right Israel has, supported by the United States, supported by the EU, supported by Ireland in many ways, even though we think we're great. We do not recognize that anybody has a right to trap people in this space and to say, we will say what happens to these people, particularly when they launch bombing campaigns on it. Now, there's two more things. How am I doing for time? I'm on a fine rant, Michelle.
No, you're doing absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. And just to say, Sarah, if Mikey hops on, you stay going. And when Mikey hops on, we let him speak. And then we can come into, because, your own story about your time on the flotilla is hugely important. But everything that you've said so far, you think you know so much, and then there's so many points that you brought up there that's really interesting. And I loved your piece about being late to political activism.
Yeah.
Well, for people who haven't joined yet.
Yeah. No, you're never too late. The best day is today,
Today.
And like the other thing is, like, it's become clear to us, no matter how bad we are at doing this, that nobody's coming to save us unless people get organized and do this. Whether that's in Ireland, whether that's for a playground in your area or to end a genocide, nobody is coming to save us, basically. So we have to do it ourselves. And I think, but we also have to learn, you have to learn a lot about how to work together and how to, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good and all of those things. But just two more things I want to say, because they might stick in people's heads, is one of the key reasons that what's happening in all of Palestine, the West Bank as well, and also now in Lebanon, just to say, in the last few weeks, over 1 million people have been displaced, and Israel has basically bulldozed 6 miles of villages, homes, and towns, just to say people are never going back there. And this is what happens. This is what happens when there are no consequences. Over and over again, there are no consequences for what they did. There was no consequences for them for expelling 750,000 people in the Nakba. There's been no consequences for them for every action ever since. No real consequences. And this is the problem. This is also what creates so-called terrorism. Because if all paths to a dignified life are removed, you cannot expect people to sit there and wait to be wiped out. You just cannot expect it. So it's our failure. If you think of the awful events, and I mean, I have sympathy for every human family who loses someone, particularly loses someone through violence. I have absolutely no problem in saying that. But if you think on October the 7th, I think Fintan Drury did it in his book. He was like, but let's talk about what was happening on October the 6th as well. Let's not leave out, what was happening all of the years before that. Like, I can tell you, there was a fantastic, absolutely fantastic and hope-inspiring non-violent protest movement in Gaza that lasted more than 18 months, right? And that was called the Great March of Return. Some people may know about it and some people mightn't know about it, but basically it wasn't organized by Hamas, although they eventually went, well, this looks interesting, we'll jump on this bandwagon, But it was organized by ordinary people saying they were going to, there's the huge security fence that is both a physical fence and a technological fence. Bearing in mind, people in Gaza are surveilled to within an inch of their life. They're watched from absolutely everywhere, from the fence, from drones, from everything. It's like it's a cauldron. But basically they decided they were going to walk towards the fence in a non-violent protest, claiming their right to return outside Gaza, the right to step out, to return to the places and villages that they were from. So they were to do this every Friday. It was going to happen every Friday. And during that, thousands and thousands of people got involved in that protest. And, of course, some skirmishes happened. Do you know what I mean? As in some kids threw stones or whatever, But basically, Israel decided during that non-violent protest, 35,000 Palestinians in Gaza were injured by the Israeli border guards that were along there. 8,000 of those were shot with live rounds. Most of them were young men shot in their knees, right? So if you imagine, one of the things the flotillas try to bring is prosthetic limbs, right? Now, and this is because a really good scholar who's in Galway, Amini Issa, said to me, she's a disability rights scholar, a Palestinian woman, and she said the occupation is a mass disabling event. This is what is happening. So you imagine a place like Gaza or like the West Bank with poor infrastructure, with the infrastructure being destroyed over and over again, and imagine trying to survive there as an amputee. Imagine trying to access the medical treatment you need as an amputee. Gaza is now the place in the world that has the largest number of child amputees anywhere, right? And these are the things that have been done over the last number of years. So that's one thing. Just another, Arundhati Roy, who's a really good writer and a really good thinker on some of these things. But she said, and I think she's totally correct, she said the only dignified thing that we will allow Palestinians to do in Western society is die. So we can pity them if they die, but we won't allow them to non-violently protest. We won't allow their court cases to win anything for them. We won't allow their petitions or their protests or their protest camp to work. We won't allow their participation in peace talks to work. We will allow nothing to work. And then, and if we continue to allow that to be the case, then we cannot expect there to be other outcomes than violence. I know for sure that I would definitely be that, I think that if I had been oppressed to that extent, I don't, I don't know that I would be reading up on Gandhi. That's all I'm just going to say. I thankfully
Thanks,
haven't
Sarah.
been. So, and just
Yeah.
so just to bring that, the last thing to bring that back is that there's an awful lot of Islamophobia involved in this, in terms of a huge amount of it is in the Palestinians and Arabs to a large extent since September the 11th, since the Twin Towers. They have become the new, it used to be communists. If you're old enough, it used to be communists. Everybody had to get shot in case they were communists. And now it's just the idea of an Arab, or the idea of particularly an Arab man. It's like, it's just, it's almost, it's almost taken as a simile for terrorism, right? Now that has no bearing on fact whatsoever. It certainly has no bearing in Palestine, where the vast majority, probably 95% of the people, have never held a gun. So the propaganda that we're reading is that every Palestinian child is born with a gun in their hand, right? And we should be trying to flip that back to the idea, which is fact and which is true, is that every Palestinian child is being born with a target on their head. And that is exactly the scenario that we're in. That is all the evidence from all the years that we've been looking at shows us that that is the case. I mean, I don't want to compare casualties, or I mean, I know that happens. Overwhelmingly, the wrong has been done to Palestinians, and the losses are on the side of Palestinians. And this is why it is one of the great, it's why it's one of the great injustices. Like, what's happening in Sudan is the biggest humanitarian conflict we have in the world at the moment. What's happening in Gaza is all of our future unless we stop it, and I'm not comparing them. It's just, we are so complicit and so up to our necks in it in the EU, from the US ourselves, through foreign direct investment. So that's really what I wanted to say. Framing that, it can be really hard when you listen. If you listen to our media, it sounds like, horrible wrongs were done to Israeli society, which is a fact, absolutely is a fact. People at a concert, it's a horrific fact what happened. But it's as if Israel is overreacting slightly, rather than that this is part of what Israel has been doing since its foundation. And I think that's the way we might be worth reframing that in our own minds. And
Yeah.
if you say that, you're not wrong, you're not being unbalanced, you're just going on the evidence that we have. And it's not anti-Semitic to say that, because these are the actions of a state we're talking about. We're not talking about the actions of a religion or a culture. We're talking about the armed actions of the apparatus of a state, and I suppose the society that supports that state. So that's really pretty much about that. That's kind of what I wanted to say. And Michelle, you wanted me to speak a bit about the flotilla
Sarah,
itself.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll just come in there, because you made a really good point there in terms of, French and jury, and referencing October 7th.
Yeah.
And I suppose what's important to say there, I suppose, is, that under international law, Palestinians, and you framed it very well in terms of the oppression and the onslaught. And, they've tried the emails, they've tried the silent vigils, the marching, is very similar to what we're doing, but making no progress. But like, under international law, they have a right to resist, up to and including armed resistance.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we kind of maybe wave around that, because it's a little bit uncomfortable. But we have to remember the context as well, and the decades of, and you've explained it all so well, Sarah. But I think an important point to make too is, just before the summer, that summer before October 7th, was the biggest land grab ever, and the highest number of deaths and settler violence in the West Bank. And so, as you pointed to rightly, we're in this situation because of our complicity and because of total impunity for Israel. And, if we remember that summer too, Netanyahu held up in the Security Council a map with the greater plan for Israel, and a line right through occupied Palestine. So, we are here because no one has stood up and said, no, enough. And there has been no accountability. Yeah.
I think I'm just slightly reframing something that I said. I don't mean that the flotillas have been the only efforts to end the siege. I mean to physically breached the siege. So, in terms of, people, lots of human rights organizations, Palestinian human rights organizations, Al-Haq, B'Tselem, all sorts of groups have been doing their very best to say that the siege is illegal. People have taken cases about it and so on. Even the ICJ, I think it is, ruled that the occupation is illegal, in case we didn't know, and ruled that there is an apartheid state. So there's been all sorts of efforts ongoing, but they haven't caused any government to act decisively to prevent the siege. And I think, like Ireland, I'm always giving out about Ireland, right? But just so temporarily, I'm not going to. So one of the things that we did all through this that I think was positive is we were one of the first countries when the United States decided it was removing funding from UNRWA. And other countries started to follow suit. So I said I would come back to that. So basically, the Israelis said they had found Hamas operatives working for UNRWA in Gaza. Okay, now just to say, Hamas is Fianna Fáil in Gaza, right? So they run, they empty the bins. They're the local administration. So there are loads of people who are in Hamas and who would be, working in administrative services and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean they're part of the revolutionary force. I mean, they may be or they may not be, but they didn't find any evidence that they were armed insurgents, despite the fact that those armed insurgents have the right to resist anyway. But they didn't find any evidence to that. But they did find that people who were in Hamas, 3 or 4 were working for UNRWA, and Israel was using that as an excuse to withdraw all the funding. Just to say, UNRWA is probably the only organization placed well enough to logistically to get aid and to get the things that Palestinians in Gaza need into them at scale as quick as we can. We can't rule out UNRWA, but just the Irish government responded pretty well by immediately renewing its commitment to fund UNRWA, which I think at that point we were showing a little bit more bravery, because other countries were pausing their funding, which was a catastrophe, in the middle of a forced famine and a forced genocide. They were withdrawing their funding. So that was something that we did that was okay. And I would like to see us doing many more things that were okay. But we seem to be okay with doing aid, but not okay with politically challenging the circumstances that are causing it. And that's what I'd really like to see people working on if we can. I'll come back to you've known Mikey yet, have you?
So Mikey is in the process of hopping on.
Okay,
Sarah.
So the minute you get Mikey, tell me to shut up. So
keep going, you're doing great.
Because Mikey's on a boat, that's the only reason I'm saying that. So he might have a shaky connection or anything like that. But just to say, around the flotillas, the flotillas were an amazing experience, right? They were in the backdrop. I don't mean this lightly, and I don't mean this that when I was feeling somewhat defeated, I was feeling that nothing we did worked. Now, don't ask me how Palestinians feel, if that's how someone safe in Ireland felt. And one of the things that the flotillas did is they really restored my faith in humanity. Just the experience of there were people from 47 countries on the flotilla with me. They were from Arab countries. They were from South American countries. They were from Malaysia, Indonesia. There were people from absolutely all over the world on those flotillas, like us. Like all of us, frustrated at their own government's inactions, So a lot of the things that we might hear, you'd quite often hear, oh, why won't Arab countries take them? First of all, we don't want anybody to take the Palestinians. We want them to stay in Palestine and build their dignified lives there. But second of all, just that you realize how much of that is manufactured in the media and how much of that is people not currently able to hold their governments to account. Because so on my boat we had someone from Kuwait, we had someone from Bahrain, we had 5 people from Turkey, 2 from Brazil, 1 from Brazil via Lebanon, 2 from Syria, 1 from Morocco via Brussels. I'm just trying to think, 2 Irish people, 1 French person, so it really was like there was like the United Nations on the boat. And just something about knowing that And knowing that for each one of us that was on the boat, there were hundreds and hundreds more people that wanted to be on the boats. You know, nearly 30,000 people had put their names down to be on the flotilla the last time. And that was like, it wasn't exactly widely advertised how you get on a flotilla. That was just people who heard about it and were like, oh, I need to go, I need to go. And so that was really inspiring. You know, it was chaotic when we were stuck in Tunis for about a week in Tunisia, and you know, like boats were breaking. They were all jalopies of boats that everybody bought because they were fairly sure that if we were intercepted, the Israelis would take the boats, and no one wanted to give them good boats, you know. And so we were kind of, you know, if one boat wasn't broken, another one was, and we were going. So we weren't great navigators, you know. We'd people trying to organize us just to keep us all going the same direction. You know, language difficulties, culture confusions. You know what I mean? It's like we had queer vegans and devout Muslims on the same boats, and we had, you know, with all sorts of different things going on. So it wasn't, do you know what I mean? No day was the same as any other day. And it was very scary. There were times when we were filled with dread and we were attacked and so on. But most of the time, it was really hard work. You've no idea how hard we were working because we were doing night watches, cleaning the boats, steering the boats. It wasn't like we had staff on the boats. We were the staff on the boats, you know. So it was like, you know, everybody was kind of sleeping 4 hours a day. We knew we were under pressure. We were under extreme scrutiny from the media and everything. Like we were doing interviews all day long off the cuff. So it was
Sarah.
Yep, you got
Yeah,
Mike.
so can I just interrupt you there because we have Mikey.
Hi, Mikey.
Hi, Mikey.
All right, gang, how are we?
How are you, Mikey? How's things?
I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Is it my line or are you guys jumping all over the place? But I'm good. I'm sorry for just barging in as well. I'm jumping on a night watch in 20 minutes or so. So I just said, well, I know I can do it. I'll jump on now. I'm really good. This is our first full day on the boat, and it's a bit of crack, to be honest. Not to take away from any of the people who are getting seasick, but like I enjoy it. Now after tomorrow come back to me, I suppose it is fairly cramped, but in terms of the sea, I don't know. I used to love pirates as a kid, so at the moment I'm kind of just living that fantasy. But yeah, I know it's a long few weeks ahead as well, but the spirits are high. The spirits are very high, so that's good, you know.
Great stuff, Mikey. Mikey, I wasn't seasick either, so obviously if you're from good peasant stock, you're doing okay.
It must be that the good
Yeah.
ancestry.
Good
So
ancestry. Yeah.
it's like we were swimming in the med and they're all saying they're freezing. I'm saying it's no fucking Atlantic Ocean, you know what I mean? or the Irish Sea either. So yeah, no, exactly. We're hardy people on our island.
Do you want to say a word about why you went, Mikey?
Yeah, it's hard to put it in a nutshell, Sarah. You know yourself. I suppose for me, again, it was just to do more, and I think just over the last few years, you know, it is difficult to keep momentum going.
Yeah.
With different things, and disillusionment was creeping in at times, and you know, I just felt that I needed to, on a personal note, it was all well and good doing bits here and there with different groups, or you know, doing stuff through the artistry and then coming off stage and going home back to my life, you know, or going to a march and then going for a coffee or a pint afterwards, you know. Just for me, I felt like I needed to do more, and this, I suppose, was the most direct thing that I could think of. And I guess also, yeah, there's also again just the test of one's convictions. But I was thinking as well in terms of, like, I don't know, I suppose being a teacher, like at this stage, over 1,000 students, teenagers, young adults have probably passed through my hands in my classes, and like, you know, they're heading into a really fucked up world. And I think this kind of fear and this don't rock the boat has been bred into us. So I think it's important. That's why it's important, all of us as educators and in some form or another, and teachers are standing with Palestine, because we're showing that, you know, you don't have to be passive either. We should take a hand and play a part in the shaping of our world and of our future. And you know, I want to live a long life. I want to have a good life, and I'm not gonna let a handful of geriatric psychopaths destroy our collective future, which is what's happening, you know. So I think we all, I don't need to tell you, but you know, I'm looking around and I'm saying things are only getting worse, and anyone who has any notion of history can see where we're going. So I think, yeah, this was just about taking action from me, and having a bit of skin in the game, and obviously to help the people of Palestine. But that's the kind of generic answer, like, you know, on a more personal level. That's why I'm here, I suppose.
Mahu. Yeah, I really hope you'll be safe. So I think it's quite, you know, things have got even more serious since we sailed last year. Now at this stage, you know.
Yeah. Well, look, like, I suppose you've had a lot of uncertainty as well. Would you not have, Sarah?
Yeah, we would. You know, well, until we got sailing, Mikey. To be honest, you know, until we got into it, I was very nervous when I was here in Ireland. But once we got started with it, and I was around all the other people, you know, I hadn't any doubts at all that that was what I wanted to do. You know, so, and I think.
Yeah.
You know, somebody said somebody who took direct action. I don't want to name them, but they said something to me the last day, and I thought I was worried about a lot of the younger people who are taking direct action here in Ireland, and I'm just worried that they're becoming isolated because there's almost like there's not a critical mass movement behind them, and then they end up in the courts. But one of them actually said to me, you know, they said I felt better every day since I did it than I did for the 3 years before it, and I kind of think that was, you know, I had felt so helpless. And the minute I was on the flotilla, that feeling was gone because I was given this opportunity to try and be part of doing something about it. You know, although we ultimately, you know, in the overall aims of things, we failed. But I think, you know, one of the things the flotillas did, they just catapulted so much attention back onto Gaza, and they provided, you know, they gave people a spark to go out and do something again when lots of us were kind of losing that spark. So I'm really hoping this one does the same, Mikey, and I'm really grateful to all of you who are on it. So it's very brave, like I wouldn't underestimate it.
No, not at all. And like, I was only saying pretty much what you said there as well. Like, when I was back home, the idea and the fear and the anxiety was a lot more. Whereas when I'm out here and you're in the middle of it, it's like being in a little bubble, isn't it? In training, yeah. And it's you're surrounded by people, but similar hearts and souls, and I found it very liberating to be here, because you don't have to qualify yourself, you don't have to explain yourself in a lot of ways. You can really just gets it, you know, and like that, I think, yeah, the collective energy is really, really, really inspiring, but also like solidifying and grounding. Like, I haven't felt afraid since I've been here, you know, and that's not to underestimate who we're dealing with. Like, we all know that, but I also think this is the whole thing, isn't it? Like, back at home and in the West, they don't want us connecting, or, you know, they want us connecting for 3 hours maybe at a protest. But when you're actually in camp, so to speak, and you're surrounded with this 24/7, you know, it's such a wave, pardon the pun, to ride that. Like, yeah, I've just found it, so I'm so privileged to be here, and it's not lost on me. And that's actually the main sentiment that I've taken away from everything so far, you know. It really is an honor to be here, because I know that everyone at home, or there's so many other people who would want to be here, and there's so many as well. Like, in one way, obviously we're taking a personal and a physical risk, but then there's so many people who are doing laborious, fucking thankless jobs that, you know, aren't going to be in the news when they get kidnapped or whatever it is, like, you know, and aren't going to get the plaudits. But like, in one way, I'd rather be here than have to do a lot of paperwork, to be honest. So
I think, you know, I think that's a really important thing to say, you know, just like to a certain extent, the ones of us who went on the boats became the figureheads. We didn't do the most of the work. We definitely didn't. You know, there's people planning, organizing, there's people buying boats, there's people at Zoom meetings every night of the week. There's people doing up protocols. You know, there's people trying to figure out the flagging or what ports can go into, and you know, the amount of work, you wouldn't believe the amount of work that's happening behind the scenes. So I'd say for every one person on a boat, there's probably 10 people working at home, and like you've never heard of their names, even though they did much more than we did, you know. So, and just like that's in Ireland at the moment as well. All the groups are, you know, they're putting the family and friends into groups. They're doing, I don't want to say too much, but they're, you know, they're like, there's an awful lot of support work. There's a political engagement group. There's mobilization groups. There's people just doing all this work all the time and getting no public awareness for it or no thanks, you know. And so, well, I mean, obviously we'll thank them, but like it's not, did you know, they're not going to become a minor celeb or anything from it, you know. It's just because they care, to be honest. They wouldn't be doing it otherwise. So, and I think that's another bit of inspiration from it.
100%, definitely.
Mikey, comrades, just it's timely, I suppose, to have you on, because you would remember the Let's Talk About Palestine initiatives over the last 2 years. You probably don't even know it's on this year because you've been in that bubble and training and trying to get yourself organized for heading out. So, but I think it's timely because, again, this year we are getting lots of messages from teachers who are saying they don't know if they can do Let's Talk About Palestine because the principal is telling them, well, you can't teach this, you can't teach that, you can't put a flag in your classroom, you know, and different things. And I remember last year at the webinar, some of us were saying, like, you know, there's people risking their lives going out here to help, and so on. So I think it's just really inspirational. We're all very proud of you for doing this, and I think it sends a message that, you know, I think I don't know whether to sound harsh, but I think it is harsh. But at the same time, I'm going to say it. I think if people's principals are given out to them over hanging a flag in their classroom, I think we need to get over ourselves and start you know, going out there. So I don't know whether you would have. What do you think teachers in Ireland over the next 2 weeks and during Let's Talk About Palestine, what do you think the teachers in Ireland can do to help you, to help the summit, the Flotilla, sorry, and also just in general? What do you think we should be doing, teachers in schools?
I don't think you were harsh at all, but to help us, well, I think firstly, again, like I'm sure a lot of you can agree, like I'm shocked with the level of ignorance from so-called learned educators around the country, you know, as in there's too many people in teaching who are in it because, you know, they thought it was a good idea when they're 5 and so they never changed their mind, or they're, you know, trying to make their mommy happy or something. Like, we need to look at what an educator is. And I think, especially in Ireland, like, it was a fucking teacher plant in 1916 rising, you know what I mean? So that's all in it as well, to be truly an educator. And I know everyone here is embodying them values, but the level of just ignorance from a lot of our colleagues leaves a lot to be desired, and has kind of had me banging my head against the wall, even from history teachers, you know. But look, I won't go into a rant because I don't know how much time I have. Well, how can teachers support this? Firstly, I think educating themselves and having a level of nuance that goes beyond the curriculum, being able to pull the strings between what they're teaching their classes and then what's actually happening in the outside world, because the students are miles ahead of so many teachers, you know, in terms of what they're engaging with and what they're seeing. And I think that's where why we're seeing the rise of like the manosphere and you know, students being infiltrated with far right rhetoric and things like that, because teachers aren't in that bubble for the most part. How can teachers support me? I guess firstly by educating themselves. And again, I'm not talking to anyone in this group or in Teachers for Palestine, but in general also then bringing the Palestine cause into their classroom and tying it in with firstly Irish history, and why there is that connection. And also just everything again, like history, you know, the chapter on genocide in the history books, it's its own specific chapter, as you know, with the message being never again. And that's redundant because the students read this and then go home and watch one on 4K on TikTok. And then so that throws up all types of questions in their minds of, well, everything I'm being taught is kind of, whether they articulate it or not, you know, the hypocrisy of the world we live in, I think, is being laid threadbare.
Absolutely.
In their minds. And that's why those young people are quite alienated and are falling prey to all these groups. So I think as teachers, yeah, we need to be able to respond to what's literally happening in the world around us, but ground it in the history, ground it in the facts, or with English, give them an outlet to express confusion and to question and ideas, and practically how to support this mission. As I said, just raising awareness, I think, in staff rooms of like why we should care about Palestine, and bringing it home then directly to struggles in Ireland, and trying to show people the interconnectivity of both, because I don't think a lot of people are able to draw the connections between the two. But also, I've been onto a good few of yous, and I know, Andrew, you're helping a lot as well, and everyone's doing different bits. But I will record a short message explaining, you know, hi, I'm a teacher and I'm doing this mad thing, and this is why I'm doing it, and you know, this is why you guys should follow along, I guess, because, you know, in one hand it's going to be very entertaining, but also you might learn something. And just again, just the awareness, because like the more eyes and awareness of our mission, it's ramming, it is more than symbolism, because I know there's been criticisms of the flotilla, but like, we're putting Palestine, or attempting to put Palestine back on the agenda. It's gotten lost amidst the attacks on Iran, and Israel now doing the same thing to Lebanon as they done to Gaza. The Epstein files, whatever Donald Trump says every other day, you know, Gaza is out of the spotlight and Palestine is out of the spotlight. So I think firstly we actually have a good chance of breaking the siege, because there's double the amount of boats as last time. And from what I've been told by people who are on boats missions, this one is a lot more prepared in advance.
Yeah.
So I think we have a better chance of physically achieving the objective, even if it's only for, you know, one boat gets through and they're immediately removed. That would still be historic and would give the Palestinians a huge morale boost, and the movement in general around the world a morale boost. But also, the more eyes that are on the mission, the little bit safer I think we are as well, because the Zionists know that the world is watching, and it might make them a little bit more restrained, although, you know, they have no problem killing Western white appearing people, you know, let alone the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians they've murdered. So, but I think it's just the awareness again of why actually we're doing it, and why they should care, you know, why they should care, and bring it home to them about how it's affecting them as well. As, you know, it's not just some issue thousands of miles away. It is literally affecting everything in the world over the last few years. I don't know, did you get all that? But
We got every bit of it.
Okay, good. I was thinking I won't be able to repeat this, so I hope there's no lag here.
Thanks very much, Mike. I don't know if anyone's any other questions for. And we leave you go scrubbing your deck.
I know, all hands on deck. That's why I was spitting that at you as well. I'm sorry if.
Yeah, no, Mikey, that'd be great. Like, if we could, we want to, if even if it was just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just a little blog or a vlog, whatever they call it these days, on the boat, just to say, I'm here, I'm a teacher, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, here's some of the jobs I'm doing, and so on. Just how long is it going to be, do you reckon, before you get there? And can you, for those who don't know and who are listening, maybe, can you give us an idea what is on your ship, and what are you bringing? And
I will do. And then I probably will have to run if that's
Yeah,
okay.
perfect.
So how long will we get to Gaza? I'm not sure. I'd imagine 2 to 3 weeks. We might possibly be stopping in one other place. There's still a lot of details that are subject to change, and that's not me being cryptic or anything either.
No. Well, it has to be like that.
It does, but also they are up in the air, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So it is hard to know, but I'd imagine over the next 3 weeks, we'll be near the red zone anyway. In terms of what's on the boats, we have with us like food provisions and medical aid as well. On this boat, and my boat is also, we left late actually, so all the boats left yesterday. We only left this morning.
Okay.
So we're trailing the pack at the minute. We're by ourselves, but we're moving very fast. So we're a supply boat for all the other boats as well, that they can kind of dock up alongside us, or what's the rib, get a rib out to us, and we have extra provisions of water and things like that as well. So like, that's what I mean. Today we're just kind of getting into the groove of life on the boat, and there's 11 of us as well, and I heard Sarah mentioning the different nationalities. There's an Irishman, an Englishman, an American, 3 Turkish people, a girl from Barcelona, from Catalonia. Who else do we have? So they're all coming out of cupboards and everything. 4 Turkish people, literally at this stage, like sleeping everywhere. 4 Turkish people, including a German Turkish lad. Yeah, we have a fairly packed boat, and I think it's a good old crew so far anyway, from what I can gauge. But yeah, still getting used to life on the boat.
Getting your sea legs.
Getting the sea legs, exactly. I have me sea legs. It's going back to land now is what I'm worried about.
You'll have
Mikey, Jake, do you want to say a quick word?
Yeah. I was just going to say to him there, Michelle, thank you, that you'll have to teach the whole crew bodging Elamy. That can be your first task, and then take it from there. But Maggie, see, just listening to you, man, I really want to extend the gratitude and the thanks that everybody else has echoed around the room here. You're a hell of a man, and you've got a hell of a job in front of you, and nobody's, I suppose at this stage, the flotilla has set sail. There's no turning back. Everybody's behind you. I hope that there's other opportunities for us throughout your journey to get a chat with you. Hopefully get an update or two from you. And just in the meantime, as I said earlier on, I sent you a wee message. I don't know if you've got it or not, but just that you're the best representative as an educator from this island that I could, if it was to put 3 or 4 of them in my hand, it would be you. And I really think what you said regards just the state of our education system in Ireland, and how shallow it is, and how outcomes driven it's become, to the point where it's completely forgot about young people. It's forgot about centering them in a planet, and which they have responsibilities for, as well as for themselves. So, I mean, we'll continue the conversation, Mickey. Just be safe, drink loads of water. What else can I say? You've done all the preparation yourself, but just do stay in touch if you can. And
You're not using Monday off.
And if they hold you in Israel, I'll be on the first flotilla out to get you.
That we're in. I have had a good education from all my friends up in Belfast, so at this stage nothing scares me. Jake, thanks for jumping on, brother. I sent you the message earlier, but you're one of a kind, and you've inspired me in ways that I haven't told you as well, in general and politically and socially. So much love, my friend.
Love you loads, man.
I'll see you soon. We have Fra Hughes with us from Belfast, actually. Do you know him?
Yep. Is he on your boat?
You need to watch
him. No, he's not on my boat, unfortunately, but he's a good substitute for Jake. It's just I just need the brogue in my life.
I couldn't lace his boots, Mickey, to tell you the truth.
You do a good job. Guys, I'm gonna run, okay?
Good luck. Sail well, Mikey. Free Palestine.
Yeah,
Palestine.
we'll have all
Sarah,
our
thank you
Mikey.
for everything. Guys, all the best, right? Cheers.
Bye, Mikey.
Sarah, and is Jake still here?
Yeah.
Is he gone?
Yeah, no.
Oh no, you're still there. So again, this is an idea. It keeps coming back all the time, and Mikey was great there. And I just I'm going to throw out the same question to the two of you, if you don't mind, just about teachers who say that they're weary and they're not sure whether they can do this because it's very intimidating to put a Palestinian flag up in their classroom. So they say when nobody else on the staff is talking about it, when they're afraid. Maybe the principal hasn't said that to them yet, but they're just kind of afraid to take that step. And I've heard that an awful lot in messages. Sometimes where the principal had said something, no, we can't be doing that here. We're non-political, we're apolitical, or whatever the terms that they use are. What would you say to them? What would your response be?
Do you want me or Jake first?
Oh, whichever. Go on, Jake will go.
Well, I could just relinquish all responsibility because I'm not actually a teacher.
I know.
Me neither.
But I do work I am a youth worker and I do
Yeah.
Irish language youth work. And I suppose what we have done in terms of but because education's a very broad church and we would consider youth work to be, considering where we come from in Belfast, the issues we've had to deal with, the histories of our communities and so on. We've had to be more innovative in the way that we talk about culture and the way that we talk about conflict and the what people call post-traumatic or post-conflict related issues or whatever. So we actually don't have to deal with we're principals who say no. We do have a number of our youth clubs in the north, particularly around Belfast and Derry, surprise, surprise, that hang Palestinian flags in their clubs. And it would be our opinion that it's because of the local history that's explored through the community organisations in West Belfast and in the Bogside, for example, that there's more presence of the awareness within young people of conflict as a phenomenon, first of all. And when I think about the south of Ireland, when I think about technically geographically illiterate, they call it the south because I have a caravan up in Mailmore up in North Donegal, which is round about 50 miles north of where I am right now. So I believe that maybe starting at home with some light conversation around what is partition, what was partition, why did it happen, where's it going? It might be a good place to start from if you want to talk about if you want to talk about conflict in a contextualized way with Irish young people. It's kind of for us. It's obviously there's a great view of youth work and of education that it needs to be neutral and that if you bring values in that you may be casting values or you may be indoctrinating is a really heavy term that people would use for it. But really what's the alternative? The alternative is that you're not really doing values driven work and that you're not prepared maybe to look at the reality of the places that we live in, why we live in this separated partition state. And without, I suppose, going all provisional on everybody, because obviously there's a lot of our history's untouched, a lot of our history's excavated. We're making headway in the north of Ireland through youth work, which I consider youth work like the last revolutionary education practice that the state doesn't have full control of. So I would get to determine and write up a lot of my own curriculum. I would be I suppose a education officer for the only Irish language regional body in the north for youth work. So we get to determine what our curriculum is, and we have developed a model called the Indigenous Youth Work Model, which kind of looks at the cultures that exist on this island, the primary Indigenous culture being that of Gaelic and the language and the culture and mythology and stories and place names and everything that's connected to it. So there are curriculums that. So my question would be, how much freedom do teachers have within the current system to express their views on human rights and dignity for other people? If you're being told by your principal that you can't put a Palestine flag up, I want to know what that policy is that's stopping you from doing that. And I would like to hear a very clear argument as to why that's in some way damaging maybe for young people to have symbols hanging in classrooms. So that's my 2 pence. I'm not a teacher. I don't know the architecture of the South and the Republic of how the education system works, but we have, I suppose, we have been part and parcel of this Dram Jarrod movement in the North, this movement for Irish language rights, and a big part of that is a big part of my involvement in that would be to try and create models of participation which don't just grab a young person and stick them in front of a camera when it's convenient for them. We want to try and build young people up so they have a real understanding of the issues that they're advocating for. And one of those issues has to be Palestine. It has to be because their futures are in the are hanging in the balance, to be quite honest. What's happening in Gaza, the involvement of Palantir and how they've been able to identify and basically wipe out families en masse. That technology's exportable to other places. And you bet your bottom dollar that Ireland, if those if that type of conflict and warfare becomes normalized, I would worry quite a lot about particularly the north of Ireland in particular, given that we have a power sharing arrangement in the north in which one party, one of the dominant parties, are openly supportive of Israel's genocide. It's very worrying from a personal perspective. I have a family history along, let's say, many people in Ireland of aunts and uncles and grannies and grandas who were incarcerated because they decided that resistance was the only avenue, as was mentioned earlier on. We had a civil rights movement here in the north for 4 years, from 1965 up to 1969, and that civil rights movement ended in the cataclysm of Bloody Sunday, essentially. So I think looking at that era of history, not to be afraid of that. There's a lot of platitudes about 1916, big supporter of it. But there's a lot of platitudes about it, and it's almost like that's the revolution, and there needs to maybe be a reassessment of the narrative. Now, how you get that into a classroom, that's over to you. I have no idea, other than a total overhaul of education policy, maybe in the context of a United Ireland debate, where we could talk about the values of informal youth work or informal education, maybe within that 9 to 3 slot. I mean, I would be very much pushing in that direction of let's bring a bit of the youth work into the schools now, and let's remove this straight jacket that disables teachers from being honest with students about how they feel. That has never been, in my view anyway, from my reading of educational history, it's never been the case that a successful educator who were trailblazers maybe in their methodologies were ever being dishonest with young people. So that's all I have to say. I'm sorry, that was completely
No, Jake, and it's been powerful. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind, Andrew, I'll just come in here a little bit. Just you have took a bit of a hiatus there for 9 months and was working on a new set. And I suppose myself personally, I really believe in the arts as a medium for so many reasons, in terms of accessing certain topics and for children and teachers to be able to really understand. So you have a 4-piece set, 25 minutes of new material. And we were talking earlier about imperialism and the intersectionality of different issues such as ecological collapse. And this, as part of our series of webinars, we're trying to connect the big dots and those issues. Could you speak a little bit to that, that piece of work that you've done with the Shanvans?
Yeah, so we basically, I was lucky enough to be invited out to Palestine last year and went out on a delegation with a number of other artists and activists from Britain, Scotland, and Ireland. And when we arrived home, then it was in March last year. We arrived home, and I was kind of a bit fed up with writing music and had lent quite a bit into direct action of different kinds. I'd met a number of people in Palestine, including the head of UNRWA in East Jerusalem, and including a councillor, basically a former councillor in East Jerusalem, who we got to go down and witness what was going on. So I came back with a sense of maybe music isn't enough, and maybe I need to do a little bit more. And from March right up to July, then I had basically disengaged from, well, the band basically we were still doing songwriting sessions and so on, but we had pulled back from doing any live events because I wanted to maybe use our energy in a different way. But come July, we reassessed the situation where we were at. We realised that actually there has been a complete dearth of discourse around Palestine from around about last July onwards, to be quite honest. And we said, well, what can we do to bring this in the focus as artists? Is there a way for us to reflect on maybe the Palestine question, but maybe find a different way of presenting that? And we obviously have an understanding that Sudan and the Congo, in Africa being one of the first major casualties of colonialism after Ireland, being our sisters and brothers who've essentially become void as a people, and there's how many thousands of cultures and language in Africa that, and people don't think of it in that way. So we decided to have a look at um, these three areas in particular, so Sudan, Congo, and the Ireland-Palestine connection, and we wrote 4 songs based on that. Now, we've very much the plan to add to that set and whatever, and turn it into a 45-minute where we could maybe headline somewhere with it. But the idea around that, I suppose, Michelle, kind of like the song we done with Maggie, it was trying to create a song or trying to create a piece of art that it's told a story visually, but which also had like the participation of numerous multiple disciplinary artists, to maximize the impact of the message. Because we're a small band, we don't have a label, we don't have resources. I work full time, 9 to 5, like as a fucking youth worker. So doing all of this in our spare time is quite a task. So July, really up until January there, we wrote the album, and we've reduced the set down, so it's a 4-piece. We've removed the drums so that it enables us to get into more venues and play this music. And I suppose it's more so to do with, I don't want to be a preacher when I get on stage, but I would like to discuss, create a narrative between the songs that allows us to draw connected dots, is what we're saying, draw the connections between the ecological collapse, which is, again, we're talking about neoliberal capitalism here, and we're talking about this unipolar world run by America, and we're talking about the end of that as the status quo, and we're trying to fill the gap. Antonio Gramsci says that, between the old and the new, that monsters arise, and we're just kind of trying to fight those monsters. Maggie had alluded to some of them. Some of those monsters are the manosphere, I mean, sexual violence against women and girls in the north of Ireland is actually incredibly disturbing when you just read even a cursory read of the statistics. And I mean, I have a daughter. I just had a wee daughter there last year. And I was raised in a house with 3 sisters and a West Belfast man. So I get equality, and I understand it, and I don't think that a lot of men get it. I think that a lot of educators get it, and a lot of people who've thought about it, but the general man in society doesn't understand the plight of women. So I suppose this song here, I mean, that's the reason why we picked the Shan Van as a name. We're 4 lads, but we're really trying to challenge the idea of what a male is, or what masculine means, or all that bullshit. So basically, the set for us is a way for me to try and through my lyricism, to try and say this, not to a brick wall, to say it out to people who could maybe hear it and maybe decide, like I did when I heard great music growing up, to say that, yeah, there's a bit more to life than money. Oh, sorry. I feel like I just went on.
No, I thank you so much. Andrew, you'd like
I
to
wasn't
come in
prepared
there?
for any of this. So
Sorry, someone.
I beg your pardon, Michelle. I just I went on
The
a bit
line
of
dropped for a minute there. Sorry, Jake.
oh, sorry, I just went on a bit of a rant there, so I just thought
Not at all,
I'd
because
talk on it.
that's the whole point. We of having these conversations is I mean, you don't realize the whole context and all of this in terms of what we're planning for the rest of the week. You just hopped on just to literally give your buddy a surprise, and we want to give him, I suppose, so much hope. And yeah, so look, he's in a good place. But Jake, you've touched on so much this evening that needs to be said, is part of what we will be doing. But in terms of the webinars and joining the dots, so to speak, and the interconnectedness. But thank you. You spoke a lot to the systems and youth work and education and what it means to be an educator and values. So look, Andrew, would you like to hop in there? Because I feel like I've been blown away, Jake. Thank you.
Can I just end on this one, Michelle? Padraig McParish, the educator to whom Maggie was alluding to as being one of the leaders of the 1916 revolution, he wrote a book called The Murder Machine. And I'm sure you are all familiar with it. And in that book is a sentiment that I would like to revisit as an educator, as a youth worker, maybe in a working group, to look at what is is the murder machine still in operation? Because it's such an important phrase, the murder machine. It brings into focus so many different enemies that we have and targets that we have, systems and machinery of murder. But he's actually talking about it obviously at an intellectual level around the customs and the traditions and the ways of knowing and being that we had on this island for at least a couple of thousand years, as according to the most prestigious scholars, that this way of living has been eradicated to the point where we export 80% of our food and import 80% of our food and are in lieu to Israel for $4 billion of trade, etc., etc. So on that definite last note, I'll end. Sorry.
Yeah. And we talked about that, our sovereignty, that's the whole question really. How sovereign are we actually? But just coming back to something you said there, Jake, when the word radical is thrown around a lot, and I suppose that's an important point to make, like being human and having a conscience and a moral compass is not radical. We're just human. And we also spoke about language and the weaponization of language. And I think in many ways, up north, like you guys are way ahead of us in many ways in terms of understanding. It was so filtered down here. And sometimes, you can understand things, but it's not until you actually have the experience of censorship yourself and the frustrations of it all. And just to share with people, like, you've a ban, you can't go back to Israel, and you very kindly came on the webinars last year. Like, you live streamed, you took the risk and live streamed and have been shadow banned since. So for anyone listening to this now or later, follow the Shanvans. They were at Electric Picnic last year, and open to invites up and down the country. You'll have lots of beds and pints waiting for you, Jake. But powerful work. And I think there's such power in the arts. And I was talking about Dr. Suhail, an Egyptian professor, and she's a lovely piece on creativity and dissidence. And I think there's such power in that. And we can see the movement moving that way and responding that way. So look, Andrew, have you any final thoughts there?
No, no, not at all. I'm like you. I'm just trying to process it, take everything in, and it's been really, really good, really powerful. Webinar to kick us off. I know we've got 2 weeks full of webinars coming up with different guests and various guests. So we would hope people come back and listen to those and get the viewpoints from as many people as possible. I suppose I'd like to thank obviously Mikey. Our own colleague and comrade, and we would want to wish him well. Anybody who is listening to this, if you can follow him on his Instagram, it's at Mikey Cullen, I think his Instagram is. We'll put it all in the description underneath anyway. You can follow the Flotilla tracker. Again, we will put that link underneath this video so teachers can follow and see where the boats are and what's happening. And Sarah, you've surprisingly, we haven't heard from you in a while, so I'll bring you in for the last word. You can round up for us.
No, it was too interesting. Just like, teachers are humans as well, so don't underestimate the agency you have in your own life. Teachers are very respectable. They're very, in terms of, if teachers complain about something, they'll be listened to. If hippies from East Clare complain about something, they'll go, oh, the hippies are complaining again. So it's just, as you can see, if people coming from the heart of the centre of the culture in Ireland are up in arms about something, there are loads of, the Flotilla is the most important. Okay, the people in Gaza and the people in the West Bank and the people in Lebanon are the absolutely most important. The most important tool we have at the moment for building up the momentum again is the opportunity provided by the Flotilla at the moment, because we've lost a bit of momentum around our protests and that. But just to say that, look, the occupied territory, right? If you're trying to think of teaching young people how to act with integrity and so on, you cannot Don't be your own censor, right? Let someone have to censor you. That's the thing that I would say. Let them come and tell you you can't do it, because you'll be surprised how far you can go before someone tells you you cannot do. I work in a community organization funded by local government, and we're called the Public Participation Network, because we go as far as we can all the time, now it's not even radicalism, is it? We just believe that people should have the resources to live with dignity in Ireland, and we wait until we're stopped before we stop. So we don't go, I wonder what they'll think if we do that. We go, how far can we go before? And I think that's one of the things. There's a great writer, his name I've forgotten. Oh, Timothy Snyder has done a very good book on totalitarianism. And that's what he always says is, do not prepare in advance. Don't obey in advance. Obey in the end if you have to, is what I'd say. My colleague Sarah Ferrigan, I think, is on the line here, and she has a different phrase of that. And that's disobey a little bit every day, right? Just to keep the muscles going. It's like you go to the gym to stay fit, you do all sorts of different things. But we grew up in a really authoritarian religious doctrine culture in the Republic of Ireland, where if you challenge things overtly, it would be bad for you, right? So we've learned to keep it on the low down, not to say too much. We've learned cynicism in a way. We've learned the worst thing you could be described as in Ireland is kind of naive or idealistic. And so we have to take that back and go, yeah, I'm really naive. Like, I did think I could maybe sail a boat to Gaza, and I didn't know how to sail a boat. But just that, there has to be hope. Do you know what I mean? There has to be hope and activities. That's really all I'd say. And the other thing is, like, people love mischief. A bit of mischief is grand. Do you know what I mean? It's in, like, something about, I don't want to sound like the far right at all, but something about our NGO culture has people trying to be more moral or more good than each other. And that's a real turnoff. If you're not feeling like that, if you're 15 and you want to rebel, someone showing you how to be the goodest human you can maybe is not right up their street. You know what I mean? But they like young people have such a strong sense of justice, what's fair, what's unfair, and they have the bravery to go and do something about it. And I think that's our job, has to be never to be saying to them, no, you can't, or no, you shouldn't, unless it's something actually dangerous, to kind of go, yeah, if they're passionate about something, to take from that passion for ourselves again as we get older. I think that in a way, steal a bit of it is what I'm trying to, if you see me hanging around schools, I'm trying to steal a bit of the young people's passion to get it back for myself. So that's really, but just look, Occupied Territories Bill, right? What I'm going to say about that, right? That has to be passed in Ireland, right? One of the reasons that has to be passed is because if we let the government not pass it, it's no more than we're letting them act with impunity. They said they'd pass it. They lied. Micheál Martin has been, he's like, there's no weapons going through Shannon. We're not helping Iran. Oh, oops, the flights are up 80%. We're teaching the most disingenuous, we're teaching a really bad way of being human in the world if we let our politics away with having made really firm promises about a very simple, like what the Occupied Territories Bill is saying. It says we won't, land that has been stolen, where people have been evicted from their houses and other people have set up businesses. Do you know what? We're not going to trade. We're not going to profit those places because they shouldn't be there anywhere. It's like the lowest bar we could set. So if we let them not do that much, they should get a riot. The other thing is just to watch. There's a mad push towards militarization at the moment. And that has to be, if we are going to be against the murder machine, if we don't want children to grow up to be part of the murder machine, we have to watch that, because that is creeping in. It's not even creeping in, it's coming in. Everybody's telling us every day of the week, Russians this and Russians that and Russians the other thing. Now, I wouldn't be a mad fan of Mr. Putin, but I'm watching an awful lot of other people attacking other places at the same time, and we're not talking about those, but we're also up to our necks in trade with those. So, American foreign direct investment, Ireland, just to say, in case Jake said it, but Ireland is Israel's second biggest trading partner in the world, which is ridiculous, right? So just to say, we're not small fry. Push the Occupied Territories Bill, then come back for the next thing. Shannon Airport, absolutely no way anyone arming a genocide should be anywhere near Shannon Airport. Like I mean, I fear they won't be held for complicity, but they certainly could be if at some point history decides it's going to pause for a little while so we can actually hold the people who are doing it to account, then they should be, because we definitely are complicit. Just to say that Palestinians in shackles went through Shannon Airport being deported from the USA not 3 months ago, right? They were in the airport, they were on a private hired chartered flight. There should have been a riot about it, right? They were illegal deportations. They were using our airport illegally. We should have acted, you know, and if that happens again, the reason we need educators is we need to educate people to say, yes, there is right and wrong. There is right and wrong, and that was wrong. Even if everybody's saying that's right and you're the only one saying that was wrong, to have the confidence in themselves that if something like that is wrong, that they have an underpinning. And that's what I'd say. And teachers can do that by example. And it's really hard, but don't censor, you know, wait till the principal does say it to you and then see what you react. I mean, not wishing to give anyone any credit, but like, and I absolutely don't agree with them at all, but like, you could take a tiny leaf out of Enoch Burke's stubbornness, not his ideology, but just the, you know, as in, let them have to spell it out why to you have to stop something, you know, why, what policy is that under, you know, oh, do you not agree with do you not agree with the UN Charter on Human Rights then? Is that it? We're not in favor of that in this school. You know what I mean? Just take a little bit of, arm yourself with the things you need to have the conversation and let them be really basic. Just to give you one example, Catherine Connolly sent out her Easter card. I've never seen a president sending out an Easter card before, but she sent out an Easter card at a very opportune time that happened to contain the key articles from the UN Declaration on Human Rights. And that was just when the Irish government was busy saying it didn't know whether it was illegal or not illegal for Trump to have invaded Iran. It was illegal. Of course it was illegal for Trump to have invaded Iran. But there was a nice little thing. You know, what about your Christmas cards? There's all sorts of, there's ways things can be done even when you can't do them.
Creativity again.
Yeah.
So Claire, just on that, Sarah, tomorrow's night's webinar is Give Peace a Chance, Neutrality, the Triple Lock, and the broader picture. We'll have Sarah O'Rourke from Irish Neutrality League, the wonderful Lila Dolan, activist, film producer, and of Walk with Layla, and Stephanie Terry from Mothers Against Genocide, Jim Roach from the Irish Anti-War Movement. So, and we will have a night on the OTB next week. But can we just say Míle buíochas, Sarah, for all your time tonight?
Oh, no problem. And follow
to
the Flotilla.
Mikey, Jake, and we'll keep eyes on the Flotilla. And there is a group being set up. So the call is a call to action for people who have the capacity and skills, whether it's social media or through being able to keep a vigil in the weeks or in the days kind of as we approach the danger zone, the red zone. So yeah, we'll be putting that call out. So stay in touch, Sarah.
We will, of course. And just to say, we knew, and also people in Gaza knew all the activism that was happening here. So don't ever think it goes unnoticed. Like the young fella from the embassy came into us in Ketziot prison, and he came into us and we said, what's the news from home? And he said, they blocked the port, right? So you don't say that. So we were like, whoa, that's because we knew nothing, you know, we'd been there for however long, no phones, no contact. And so that was almost the first thing he said to us. He said, they've the port blocked. So we were like, good on them. So
yeah. So we'll finish with your phrase, you know, disobey a little every day. And finish with a Palestinian phrase, you know, they always talk about hope, and hope is an act of resistance. So, Ihuagach Dena Gurmagat Slán.
Gurmila Mahagut.